Hi, in this video I'd like to show you what Window Rock, Arizona looks like when you look closely and you adjust your photos to bring out the vibrancy of the color to show what it would look like about 1,000 years ago. If you zoom in and look real close, you can see that people have been scratching and pecking at these rocks to remove the dark black patina. The more of the patina you remove, the lighter it gets. So the pinkish, reddish colors are somewhere in between the interior whitish color and the black on the outside. Some of this pigment may also be mineral paint that people added to the rock. Also note the horizontal and vertical lines, how this has been gridded off, which you would need to do if you're trying to scale up a drawing onto this big piece of rock up here. Another thing I spotted in this photo was a regular pattern of holes up here in the actual window. And they look like they could be drill holes. Now I can't say that for sure. I can't go up there and study this feature. But I bet if somebody did, they would find that there are either drill holes or tool marks up in this feature. If you think about erosion, wind and rain should have rounded that rock and made it really shiny and black with patina. There's no way that natural processes could create this really freshly broken out hole. Not only that, but I don't know other than underground rivers where there's enough force and power from water to actually drill a hole through a rock like this. You'll see that the rocks that are up there are all placed to form shadows and to help create this art, this illusion that there's a face. As I zoom out, look again at all the different color variations on the rock, and especially the real bright red color. If that had been exposed to oxidation for millions of years, it would be black, like the patina you see that's still there on the rock. When I work with this prehistoric art and try to figure out what images are there, I usually just start by outlining the obvious differences in color, the patterns, follow the lines and scratch marks that are there, and before you know it, you start seeing what images they meant you to see. And you can look at it in a multitude of ways, and that's how they meant it to be viewed. Now I'm going to zoom in and show you the images that are on these rocks. Like I said before, I think that this is a subtractive process where they chipped and scraped at the patina to different depths to create the colors and shadings. And you can see that there's no way that nature creates these kind of scenes. If you look closely, you'll see that every little division I've drawn out here forms a different face or figure in some way, and sometimes multiple ways. As you can see, this is an image of people all lined up and tied together along a rope. This is a common theme in prehistory, showing people being led off to be executed. I've even found this on rock art by Fort Hancock, Texas. The archaeologists only see the peck marks on this rock, but you have to look at the whole thing and all the different pictures that you can see in the shading and shadowing on this rock. And one way you can look at it is it's a lot of people tied together and lined up, just like at Window Rock. And at Window Rock, there's even a larger horizontal feature here representing a larger rope tying these larger heads together. And I believe that this is an intrusive feature that contains tombs. They probably took what was a natural fissure or crack in the rock and expanded it and dug tombs back into this feature here. Because I think that's what they were doing with most of this carving of the rock, that they were creating monuments to themselves and creating tomb features in the rock. They were obsessed with hiding their tombs. They knew that they would get robbed if they were found easily. and they've done a pretty good job of fooling modern man. But I've decoded the secret, and I've seen all the disturbances in all our mountains in southern New Mexico where I can see that there are large tombs that have been dug into the side of the mountain and then collapsed and covered up with material from above. Here are some other ways to look at the figures that are here at Window Rock. You can reverse them, stand them on end. It always creates a figure every direction. You can zoom out. If you're farther away from the feature, you'll see these larger faces like that. And then when you zoom in, it changes. You can see smaller figures. Here, I believe these people are being flayed. This is the way that Mesoamericans depicted people that were having their skin removed, they have red and white striping on them. As I was playing around with the picture, adjusting the colors, I decided to reverse the colors. When I flipped it over, I just started noticing this pattern that looked to me like tombs going into a mountain. And this is what I believe that people were doing. Building some pretty large chambers underground and then creating these stone statues as memorials to the people buried there. Next, I want to go to Bandelier, New Mexico, and compare what's there to Window Rock and how scientists pick and choose what to say is man-made. Because there's a fairly large prehistoric occupation here, it was hard to miss that people had carved these figures out of the rock. Now, if this were found out in the Bitsy Badlands or somewhere out in Monument Valley or anywhere else in the Southwest, scientists would say this was carved by erosion. As you can see, the cliff faces behind those other features are all carved. There are square holes that have been carved into the volcanic tuff. Now, everywhere in the world there are features like this, and they're tombs. But because American archaeologists thought that this was just a totally separate culture, that they never compared it to the rest of the world and say, well, aren't these tombs? Instead, because they found some corn in some of them, they became storerooms. As you can see, that this entire cliff has been carved into all these figures, and that this is a giant memorial monument, not a bunch of storage rooms for corn. And when you look close at the lower portions, you can see all this masonry work that's built into the side of this hill. And that's probably the location of tombs that have already been filled in. And that this is an open tomb, and it would be bricked in and then mortared over so you wouldn't even know it's there. So let's compare this to another place in southern New Mexico. At the south end of the Organ Mountains, there's a rhyolitic tuff ridge, and it's all been carved by man. And again, scientists here have decided that because there's no big pueblos around, that this is all natural, even though there are prehistoric occupations all around these hills. And in this case, I have been out there and studied the rocks, and I see the drill holes and the tool marks and all the pecking, and how they removed the patina to create all this art, and how they used mortar to create some of these stone heads and to turn them into carvings and to fairly complex art. Now let's jump to the cliffs at Chaco Canyon. Now here you have a large occupation that everybody knows about, but for some reason scientists ignore the carvings in the cliffs. It would seem to be that the first thing you would have done when you came here is go, oh, the tombs must be in these rocks up here. But for some reason, American archaeologists have had just this totally different concept of what people were doing here. Just like at Window Rock, you can see that there are all these sharp edges and that this is all freshly broken out rock. and that there's no way that wind and rain carved out this feature. And finally, I'll show you what I see at Mesa Verde, these shelters that appear to be carved out by man. It's all, again, sharply broken. The patina's been removed. They don't appear to have been weathered out by wind and rain, and you see some fairly square and large blocks. And then the patina, again, has been pecked away at to form art. You can see here that the whole side of this cliff is not a natural feature. Somebody has carved that out to make it look like that. That nature wouldn't make it look regular and leave that patina in that pattern. And you can see the rocks at the top are all stacked up and are also freshly, sharply broken rocks. So there's probably tombs behind those big slabs up there on top, as well as sealed into the side of this cliff. And they've disguised it so you can't see where they are very well. But if you went and looked closely, you'd probably see some masonry work or some mortar cracking around the edges. So looking at these large things that people have decided are cliff dwellings, and thinking that there's tombs all in here, I started realizing that these are actually really large tombs that are being carved into the side of this cliff. You can see on the edges there are these mortar and stonework statues being built up. And each one of those little compartments in there was probably going to hold different members of a lineage or a royal family. And then eventually it would have been all sealed up. I believe the top area up there already has sealed in tombs. And that's why we're not finding them, because look at how well that's disguised on top there. In conclusion, I just wanted to say that because of the assumptions that modern scientists make about the world around them, both natural and in historic past, we've failed to detect that there were these highly sophisticated people with the engineering skills to be able to create all this. Because everywhere I go in southern New Mexico, when I really look at the ground and I study the rocks, it all looks to be disturbed and freshly broken. And it all forms mosaics and different forms of art. The sides of hills carved out, and even the patterns in the vegetation were created in prehistoric times.